Hello everybody, this is Ben Barkey. This is my presentation for the case study dealing with Oakwood High School. First, I want to start off by summarizing the facts. Oakwood High School is in the Midwest. It is a blue-collar district. Teachers have enjoyed working at the high school and the school district. It's a very stable school district. Has really strong culture as well because teachers are often seen out on the weekends at school events. Just recently, the teachers organized a fundraiser for one of their junior students who's suffering from bone marrow cancer. Also, the state has let all the superintendents know that next year's funding will be a decrease in funding. The central office has also negotiated a 5% raise for all of the teachers. Since I am the acting superintendent, I decide to form a committee with 2 teachers, president of the PTO, and 2 district office staff to kind of come up with some solutions. After a long debate and also considering touching the sacred cow of transportation, because it's been provided free to the students for a long time, the committee decided to focus on these 3 areas as potential cuts. 1 would be transportation. 2 would be athletics, after-school events, and athletics in general. And 3 would be replacing music teachers with volunteers. As a superintendent, I decide to present this to the school board as a discussion item for the next school board meeting. At the school board meeting, several groups spoke out about this proposed plan that wasn't intended, so somehow the information got out to the community. In terms of music, one of the community members suggested having volunteers or docents come in and teach the class. One of the coaches suggested passing the costs on to parents to defer some of the cost of athletics instead of getting rid of it. And Mr. Jackson, who was the father of the son who received the fundraising gifts, was the spokesperson for about 100 parents speaking out about transportation and how that added cost will be a burden to the parents of the community, and also making note of the 5% raise to the teachers. Trying to understand the problem in this case, I've identified 3 areas of focus. 1, the funds. The decrease in funds from the state is an issue that the district's going to have to deal with. Also, this community has a strong climate, very small-knit community. Everybody gets along really well. Everybody supports the school. And something like this can really have an impact on climate moving forward that could take years to fix. And finally, the other one is the committee that was assigned. It was a very small committee, not very informed, and they picked 3 big things to kind of cut in funds. And that information got out to the community because the superintendent was going to present these as discussing items at the next school board meeting. And there are already people there ready to debate it. Not a first good step for everybody involved. Next, I want to take a look at some legal or ethical issues in this case. Let's first take a look at the legal. The school board approved a 5% raise for the next school year. That's a contract. It's binding. Be very hard to get away from that. I'm not sure you really would want to. Next, let's talk about some liability. If they get rid of transportation, there might be some more liability on students walking to school, getting in accidents. Of course, when a student walks to or from school, that's an area where you're going to need to supervise, and they're still underneath some kind of school care. If they're not riding a bus transportation and they get a vehicle accident, there's just a lot of possibilities for some lawsuits. Also, for Indiana, it is not a requirement actually for students to be provided bus transportation. I know that's different in a couple other states, but for us it's not a right in our Indiana Constitution, and that was solved back in, I think, 2015. The other thing is if you put volunteers or docents in the classroom, you're facing some other liability charges as well. You really need a certified staff or a classified hourly staff in those positions. Let's go ahead and then peruse the ethical issues. There's something called good faith bargaining, and that 5%, when you're talking about that and it's not really out there, you don't really talk about it until it's been ratified by the teachers union. You also have a moral obligation to the students of fine arts. Not very many people get arts taught in the classroom. music being one of those. So removing that program as a whole, you really have a moral obligation to have the liberal arts be a part of the student's education. The same thing goes with extracurriculars as well. There's a lot of research out there that students really benefit from the extracurricular activities, and getting rid of athletics and decreasing those funds would also not be great for students. The final one is adding the extra cost onto parents, whether it's parents paying for athletics or transportation. It's a blue-collar community that just did a huge fundraiser. I'm not quite sure now is the right timing or ever to pass on those costs to parents. You got to be really careful about that because that causes a lot of issues. So here is the case in a nutshell. Oakwood School District, which has enjoyed great culture, is thrown into turmoil by decreased state funding that has caused the superintendent to appoint a committee to provide options to the school board. And that didn't go very well. I'm going to break up the facts into three groups: people, places, and programs. For the people, you have teachers organized a fundraiser for a student. You have a budget committee. You have a blue-collar community. You have Mr. Jackson, who is the spokesperson, the father of the student who received those funds. You have the PTO president, who's on the committee, and you have the superintendent. Places. Oakwood is in the Midwest. I'm from the Midwest. Blue-collar, very conservative. It's a tight community, just like most of our schools here. Well educated, there's a university 30 miles away, and I think that's really important because even though it's a blue-collar community and there's a college really close, you're dealing with some very smart individuals. And also, this all happened at a school board meeting out in the public, and it was kind of a surprise. The programming, you got 5% teacher raises, you got state budget cuts that impact school budgets, transportation is the sacred cow, you've got elementary music at the elementary level, and you've got athletics. I want to prioritize this piece of information into 5 areas, and they're in their order of prioritization. The first one is understanding. One of the big things to this case is there's some information that is missing that would really help us understand how to solve this problem. The first big piece that's missing is how much is the school losing funds. Could our different spending lines absorb some of those loss, like equipment, teacher supply, maintenance? More information about the fundraiser for Tyrone Jackson. I know a little bit, but I'm not quite sure how much is raised. If it's a significant amount or not, that can really impact some of the decisions moving forward, especially when we're talking about the culture of the corporation. And how quickly do we need to make this decision? When did the states let the schools know? If it's a small turnaround, that's going to provide a lot of need for focus on solving this issue. If you're a semester and a half out, you've got a lot of time to gather some more information before you make a decision. Next one, the outcome. This is a list of people that have stake in the outcome of the decision. Obviously, the teachers. They're impacted by this decision, regardless if they're going to get a 5% raise or not. If the state is cutting budgets, that means down the road, they could feel some impacts as well. The music teachers, of course, at the elementary level, are interested in the outcome because their jobs are on the line. Same thing for the athletic coaches, and the parents of the athletes, and the parents of the people who transport their students. Both those parents might have to shell out hundreds of dollars to get their kids transported to school and to get their kids involved in athletics. Bus drivers as well. If they remove the bus driving transportation, what are the bus drivers going to do? Are they going to lose their job? And of course, the building level administrators, because it's going to be their responsibility, if things do go a little sideways, to continue to have a great culture and a climate in their buildings. Plus, if you have to cut costs somewhere, they should be worried as well about their jobs and their salaries. Communication. In the middle of this case, it went straight to a committee of 5 people, with not much communicating to the teachers union, central office leadership, building level administrators, school board, political leaders, and community leaders about, hey, this is what's coming up. It's going to be pretty rough. Just keeping everybody in the loop. It went right from the information, right to the committee, right out to the public. And it surprised a lot of people. I kind of operate by this. Nobody likes bad surprises. And this was a bad surprise to a lot of people. If you're able to communicate, you can get rid of a lot of those bad surprises and save you a lot of trouble down the road. Insight. What can I learn, or do I have enough information to solve this problem? Currently, I don't believe there's enough information to make a decision. I also think this committee was just an okay idea, but they also need to gather more insight than looking at a school budget and asking for some help or some other input. Finally, stakeholders. Missteps in this decision and the process at arriving at a solution can alienate a lot of key stakeholders in the community, including board members. If this really goes south, your job's on the line. And this is what I want to talk about. In at least Indiana, we talk about the 3 B's: buses, band, and basketball. There are 3 things in Indiana that will really cause a superintendent to lose their jobs. If we take a look at busing, that was the first thing the committee wanted to fix or to cut. Band. This is not necessarily a band thing, but music class in elementary is very close to that. It's a feeder program. And in Indiana, basketball, I'm sure it's the same for Kansas, but it goes back to athletics. If a superintendent messes with these 3 B's in Indiana, they're going to have a hard time keeping their job. It's just the politics of it. I'd like to discuss the 4 options that I see as possibilities. Option 1, no action at all. You risk the district being in financial disrepair and will impact the students, teachers, and community. Option 2, the committee's recommendations. You've already seen that this is going to probably alienate a lot of people in the community and could potentially cost you your job. Next one, we kind of talked about that there wasn't enough information to understand all this. Creating some extended focus groups, listening to concerns, meeting with the school board, and gathering more information before you make a decision can really help. The 4th option is what I call efficiency money. That's working with the leadership team and the school board to create specific pockets of efficiency money by making very strategic cuts, so that way you do not impact 3 major areas that really impact the community. Option 1. Here are the pros. Initially, no one's upset because you don't do anything. They don't even know about it. There's no extra work that needs to be done because you just sit back. Cons. It could be potentially crippling to the district, and you could be scrambling and trying to recoup for the next few years. Everyone gets upset because you haven't really done your job very well. And one way to help save costs is reduction in force, where you RIF some teachers to help save costs, increasing classroom size. Option 2, committee's recommendation. Collaboration is a really great thing, and it's going to save some costs. But what that committee recommended dealt with the 3 B's, which is a big no-no in my book: buses, band, and basketball. By doing this, you risk losing your job. The culture definitely takes a hit, because you can see at the school board meeting there's a lot of people that are already upset. And you have a small group of people making some recommendations that don't necessarily have the background or the know-how to make those recommendations. And it financially impacts parents. Option 3, the extended focus group. Pros, it's a wider input, it's more collaboration, it's compromise solutions, and it increases stakeholder involvement, which I think is really important because that's going to bring in a lot of people with some specific knowledge on how to solve the problem. Cons, this one is time sensitive. We still don't know how long we have to make that decision. It's a short while or a long while. Creating focus groups, collecting that data, meeting with your leadership team, it can take a while. It also can create some lack of consensus because you have more people involved in the decision-making process. And some of those people might not quite understand how education budgets work, even from the business world. Even financially savvy people don't quite understand how education budgets work, so they have a steep learning curve. Option 4, efficiency money. 1, it generates savings. It builds culture because it requires everybody to come together. This is already a tight-knit community, and you can use that to your advantage. And it also saves the athletic, music, and transportation departments. The cons. You might not generate enough savings. We still don't know how much of the budget cuts there's going to be. And really, bottom line, is it depends on ADM. which stands for your average daily membership, or really your student body, because you get funds for how many students are in your corporation. So if your student body goes down next year, you're going to lose even more money. So you got to be really careful about ADM. I think the best option here is option 4, and here's why. If we're able to cut supply lines just a little bit, we're able to save a little bit of money. Same thing with tech lines. We just cut back a little bit. We'll just do with less. Maybe you won't do that big project where you're all going one-to-one. Maybe in terms of supplies, the teachers don't necessarily need to have all that money for supplies like staples and pencils and paper. Just got to be a little bit more leaner. It's not a bad thing. What I would also do is I'd cap hiring experience. If somebody is retiring or leaving, you don't want to bring in an experienced teacher at 20 years. You're going to want to bring in a new teacher. It's going to cost half as less. That's a really big savings. I would also consider, with the school board and the business office, retirement buyouts. Sometimes this can be a really good thing. Sometimes this can be a really bad thing in terms of saving. You need to generate more people wanting to retire than what was planning on. If you offer a buyout and you only get the teachers that were going to retire, then that's a pretty big risk. Also, areas is to cut FTE. When you look at scheduling in the secondary level at middle school and high school, the last thing you want is class sizes of 7, 10, 12 that are really small. By cutting down on those sections, you can actually save a position or two where you would take some of those teachers and you would combine them. Trust me, a teacher would rather work outside their license area than getting rifted. The other thing is looking for community grants. Depending on what community you live in, you can probably seek for some really strong partnership here, maybe to help with the tech lines that were lost in terms of donations of tech equipment, or maybe a local church to help with the lack of supplies. I think all these options are very realistic, and they might be able to get you enough savings so you don't have to make any drastic measures. Here's the roadmap that I would undertake if I was the superintendent. One of the first things I would do is I would reach out to all the other superintendents in the state, just to kind of get their feelings and what they're hearing. I'd also reach out to the political leaders. When you're a superintendent, you have some of those connections. It's very easy to talk to people at the state board. The last thing that I did was I looked up the last time that there was a budget cut during the Great Recession in the mid-2000s. In Indiana, historically, the budget cuts were 7 to 10%. That can be significant, 10%, but it's definitely manageable if you make all those cuts. Efficiency money. It definitely is going to make it a lot easier on everybody. Once I gather some more essential information, I'm definitely going to communicate with the school board, my leadership team, and the teachers union. This is just to keep them in the loop and also start providing the next steps of setting up how we're going to decide what's going to get cut. I would then sit down with my business office and analyze the forecasted budget and see if we cut 5% here or 7% there to the budget, how much cash does that generate? And then I would also evaluate a potential savings for a retirement buyout. I'm not necessarily saying this is a good thing or not. It could generate a lot of cash, but also could be cost neutral. I also would want to start to connect with community partners, not necessarily as a drastic measure, but laying the groundwork to saying, hey, churches, hey, organizations, we're going to have to cut some of our funds. Are you able to help out here, here, and here? The next thing I would do is I would work with building principals to see what positions are becoming open, and also seeing which teachers are close to being retired. That way I can start generating a list. And as we get close to the end of the school year, and the students are registering for classes, I'm definitely going to want to take a look at those class lists to see if there's any classes that we could collapse, therefore saving some FTE. And through this whole process, I know it's step 8, but constantly circling back around and communicating with the school board members, the key stakeholders, superintendents, in this whole discussion. It's going to take a group of you to get this done, but I really don't think kicking it to a 5-person committee with a little understanding was the best way to go. It created a lot of hassle because there were some unhappy surprises. Here's the 2 references I use. The first reference deals with Indiana bus transportation and court law back in 2015. The final one deals with just an overview of Indiana budget cuts that happened, I believe, in 2008. And it kind of gives a rough estimate that most schools got cut 7 to 10%. It really just depended on the funding per student. That's it from a case study. The weather here in Indiana has stabilized a little bit. It's been nice and cool, a little bit of breezy, a little bit of sun, some of your afternoon thunderstorms. I hope out there in Kansas you guys are feeling the same kind of weather because it is amazing here in Indiana. Hope everybody has a great week. See ya.